Okay, well, yeah, thanks very much for the invitation. Thanks very much to Communigrow for giving me this chance to speak to you, volunteers and other members of the community who are interested in growing food, in learning more about food. My name is Sara Gonzalez, and I am a professor at the School of Geography at the University of Leeds. And I have been doing research on markets, on traditional markets for a few years now. And I'm going to share with you the findings of a research in which I've been involved with for the last 3 years or so, where we have been wanting to know more about how traditional markets function as community hubs for a more sustainable and inclusive economics. So I've listed here some of my colleagues that have been involved in this research. And if you're interested, we have a lot more resources in our website. If you type markets for people on Google, and you can also follow us on Twitter so you can see, follow more of our research. I mean, first of all, I wanted to share with you what I understand are traditional markets. So hopefully you still see it because I've moved it to presentation mode. Traditional markets in the UK look like this. So they tend to be indoor. They can also be outdoor markets, particularly in southern England, in London, in the south. In the north of England, they tend to be more like big buildings where you have lots of stall holders inside. Some of them are very grand buildings, like, for example, you can see there Borough Market in Halifax, Leeds Market, which is the one is close to me where I do my shopping. Berry Market, for example, another one that we've got a picture there. So you can see there is indoor places or outdoor places where people come. Sometimes they are very few days of the week, or sometimes they're there all the time. So there's a huge variety. But this is the kind of markets that we've been studying. So traditional markets in the UK, like I said, tend to be indoor or outdoor spaces. They're regulated, where people gather to sell and buy a variety of products and services. In the UK, in markets, we don't only find food. I mean, in other parts of the world, this kind of markets mainly sell food. But in the UK, we find you can have your, I don't know, your clothes fixed, or you can buy shoes, but you can also buy a mobile phone, or you can also buy some hot food or fresh food. They are one of the oldest forms of exchange and trade, and they are found all over the world, really, in very different formats. And they serve millions of people. And I think this is really interesting because even though, I mean, I think many people would perhaps think that these kind of markets are something of the past, that given that we have supermarkets today and shopping centers and Amazon and Tesco online, you would have thought that these kind of places have kind of ceased to exist. But they're still there. And I think that in itself is something very interesting. Why are they still there? And in other parts of the world, they are very, very central. And so they still serve millions of people as customers, but also they form people's livelihoods. In the UK, these markets, they tend to serve low-income, ethnic minorities and migrants and older groups of customers. And they are quite different to perhaps farmers markets, which tend to serve perhaps more middle to high income groups. And we call them retail markets because they are slightly different to the wholesale markets, which serve other businesses. And like I said before, they serve, they sell a variety of goods. And what's interesting is that in the UK, about 80% of these kind of traditional markets are owned and managed by public local authorities. So they are in a way public spaces. And we could even think of them as public services. Just like any other, like local authorities run schools and they have other services. Well, markets could be seen as part of the kind of array of services that local authorities provide. And of course, there's other markets in the UK, for example, farmers markets, the kind of perhaps markets that Communigrow members and volunteers might be more familiar with, like small market towns. The markets that happen in market towns are small, perhaps they happen only a few days a week. And we also have markets that have become gentrified, which is, I've got an example here, Old Spitalfields Market in London. Some of you might know about it. There's several markets like this in the UK, which have moved towards more becoming sort of leisure spaces where you can go and find hot food or street food, and they become sometimes part of the evening economy. and they are very much addressed to high income customers, office workers, people looking for a different sort of experience, a more informal eating experience. And I think this is I think there's a bit of a danger that traditional markets in the UK move towards this model, because if they move towards this model, they're going to be alienating the more long-term users. So my project with other colleagues has been around how can we make sure that the community value of traditional markets is made visible and is valued properly, so that we don't end up thinking that the only solution to traditional markets is for them to become sort of gentrified. So that's been my project, which we call Markets for People. So markets for everyone, and not just for, for gentrified cities and towns, but for everyone. So I will skip very quickly, but this project was funded by the Economic and Social Research Council, and it was led by the University of Leeds, but it was also in collaboration with the main market industry actors like the National Market Traders Federation and the National Association of British Market Authorities, and also in collaboration with the New Economics Foundation. So we interviewed key stakeholders in the markets industry, and then we also focused on 3 particular traditional markets: Bury Market, Newcastle Ranger Market, and Queen's Market in London. And in those 3 places, we conducted quite large surveys with market users, 500 in each. So altogether, we surveyed 1,500 market users. We also did focus groups with customers in those markets. And we then also interviewed traders and the market managers in those cities. So altogether, we've made perhaps done around 50 interviews with key stakeholders. We had a survey with 1,500 users, and we had 6 focus groups with customers. So we've produced a huge amount of data, and we're still in the process of actually presenting this data. And one of the things we did is that we published reports for each of these markets, which are available and you can read them. And so in this presentation, I'm just going to give you some key findings that from the survey mainly that we did in these 3 markets. I wanted to say that, if you ever were interested in doing something like this, our customer survey is online. You can re-replicate it. If you wanted to find out a bit more about, perhaps if you eventually, I don't know, you think about creating a market yourselves, or you're interested in running a market, then there's some resources there that we have that you could be interested in. And I also wanted to highlight that together with the organization Sustain, I do think that markets can be part of a fairer and more sustainable food system. And I know that traditional markets, such as the ones I've been talking about, don't necessarily sell local and locally grown food, because they have food from all over the world. But still, I think they can be part of a more sustainable food system, because they are, as they tend to be run by local authorities, then any kind of surpluses, any income that gets generated in those markets goes back into local authorities, which can be spent in other services. And growing the market sector would also disrupt the existing supremacy, really, of corporate supermarkets, which, as you know, they have a huge stronghold in the UK's grocery sector. So I very much agree with Sustain's aim that we should try to have a 10% of the retail market for non-multiples, and this would mean having more markets all around, up and down the UK. Okay, so this kind of nice diagram summarizes the findings from our research, and we think from what we found that the markets can be community hub for inclusive economies. What does an inclusive economy mean? That's a huge subject, but I guess to very much, to summarize it, an inclusive economy is one in which we're not, we're thinking about including everyone, and not just kind of growing the economy for the high income earners, so that it will later on trickle down, because we know that the trickle down economic system doesn't really work. And we have to grow the economy in a bottom-up way, in a more grassroots way, which includes people from the start, rather than thinking that, growing the economy for high income earners will then somehow trickle down. We know that doesn't work. So an inclusive economy is one which takes people who are at the moment on the margins of the economy, vulnerable people, takes them into the heart. And it's also an economy in which when trying to grow things at a local level, rather than putting our resources on big corporations, we tend to take up their profits for shareholders who are often very far away. So it's an economy in which we're thinking about community wealth rather than the wealth for shareholders who are very distant. So if we think about markets in this way, then
Sara,
yes.
Sara, sorry for interrupting you. You mentioned a diagram. Is that something that you are showing us?
Yes.
Oh, I cannot see it. I'm still seeing the second slide.
Right. Let me just move that. Can you see it now?
I can see it now. Yes, perfect.
Maybe I will stop showing. I was on presentation mode. I'll probably stop that.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Okay, so yeah, we can see these are the main areas which we kind of summarize our findings, and they revolve around this idea of inclusive economy. So markets serve disadvantaged and vulnerable people. They provide affordable and good quality staples. They create meaningful interactions, social interactions. They build a local economy. And in order for markets to do those things, they need to be valued in and invested in by operators, in general local authorities. And they also need to be run in a collaborative and democratic way. Okay, so going into more specifically our findings, the first thing that we wanted to highlight is that traditional markets in the UK, they serve disadvantaged and vulnerable groups. For example, if we look at the sample of our market user survey, so remember that we surveyed 1,500 people in 3 markets. So if we put together all of that sample, we asked people where they lived, we asked them for their postcodes. So with those postcodes, we were able to map where those customers come from. And we saw that the majority of the customers for these 3 markets are coming from the most deprived neighborhoods in their own cities. So often this is seen as perhaps a disadvantage by market operators, the fact that they are serving people from the most marginalized neighborhoods. But we actually wanted to turn this around and say, well, this actually can be a resource, because often local authorities want to reach out to these more vulnerable groups, and they are actually already at the market. So if you want to develop some sort of, perhaps, for example, health policy or a food policy, you know that those people that come from the most challenging neighborhoods are shopping at the market. So you could try to reach them in that way. We also know that markets tend to be relatively older. And these are some key facts that we found, that for market users that are over 70 years old, 75% have been visiting for 20 years. So this means that for these older residents, these markets are almost like a home, because they've been visiting for so many years, for a large part of their life. And so many of them visit at least once a week. So 80% at least visit once a week. And 78% said that they felt less lonely when they visit the market. So these are key spaces for older people. They've been going there for many years, they're part of their lives. When they go there, they bump into people they know, they arrange to meet family and friends. So they are really social spaces for older people. And here we have a key quote from one person from a focus group who said, older people come in here because they can't afford to put their heating on. So they'll come in here, buy a cup of tea, and they can sit for hours in the warm. They're not particularly going to buy anything specific, but it's just spend a couple of hours chatting or whatever. So this is obviously hugely relevant as we're moving into this autumn and this winter, where energy prices and energy bills are going to be so high. Many people are going to be looking for these spaces which are open, which are welcoming, and where they can spend time without necessarily spending a lot of money. So markets can have a key role in there. Markets also provide affordable and good quality staples, food, but also homeware or clothing. We found that we thought this was actually quite interesting, because we found that out of our whole sample of market users, more than 50% do half of more of their food and drink shopping at the market. And this is in cities where we have supermarkets all over the place. There are supermarkets everywhere, very, very accessible to people. And there's still people are actually going to the market and doing a lot of their shopping at the market. So they have a very strong pull. People are going there for a reason. They are bypassing other supermarkets that are nearer to them to do their shopping there. In the case, for example, of Newcastle, we were able to plot that, and we were able to show that many people that, I mean, the dots, the blue dots, are areas where our customers, where the customers of Granger Market live, and the areas in black are places where perhaps there's less accessibility to other shops. So they're not exactly food deserts, because we don't really have food deserts in Newcastle in these areas, because everyone has got access to some kind of supermarket. But they are the areas which are in bit lighter colors, the areas where there's less access to groceries. So we can see there's actually quite a lot of people that are living in those areas that are shopping at the market. So, for example, if the Granger Market in Newcastle was to close or was to stop selling fruit and vegetables, then these people would actually find themselves in a difficult situation to actually access affordable fruit and vegetables. So we think markets like this actually are a strong source of healthy food. And I just wanted to also mention that I don't know if you're aware that there's a charity called Rose, Alexander Rose Charity, and they what they do is that they provide food vouchers in collaboration with local authorities, which they give to families, which can be spent in markets. So rather than spending these food vouchers in supermarkets, they have to be spent in markets. So that's something, a really interesting initiative. Okay, so we also found that traditional markets create and facilitate meaningful social interaction. So we got lots of examples of this. We have all kinds of quotes that attest to this. People were saying it's a kind of social life. It's not that I go there only for food and clothes. For example, another person was saying, personally, there's a lot of my family who are elderly and my mom's disabled. And she finds she can go there, she can do her shopping, she can have her lunch and go and have a chat with her friends, and she can be there a good couple of hours, and she's got a whole day out just under one roof. So particularly for people who are perhaps disabled or ill, markets can be very, very open places. So when we ask people at the market, I feel whether they felt less lonely when they go at the market, these are the people that were more positive about this statement. And it was, in fact, the people who are long-term sick or disabled who were most positive about this, or those people that were looking for work or looking after home or family, or they were from the lower socioeconomic groups. So clearly, it's the groups who are more vulnerable that are feeling more at home in these kind of markets. Then I mentioned already that markets can build up an inclusive and sustainable economy, the kind of elements I was talking before, people when people shop at markets, they are shopping generally in a place which is part of the local authority. We have the latest data, which is not very up to date, shows there are over 1,000 markets in the UK, which is estimated that employ over 50,000 people, with a collective turnover of 3.1 million people. So markets are estimated to have a multiplier effect of around 3, which would suggest that retail markets are worth almost 10 billion pounds to the UK economy. So this means that when we shop in a market, this has other benefits because that supports local businesses and kind of supply chains and so on. So markets do actually generate an economic effect around it. Also because you will be aware in your own towns, when a market is on, more people go into town centres, and then they go and shop and they visit other places. So that's generating other benefits as well. When we ask in our survey how much people spend when they go to the market and how often they go, we found that people go very often and they spend considerable amounts of money. So for example, 80% visit once a month. The average spend on food and drink is £20, and the average spend is on other goods is £24. And they also spend outside of the market. And their main reason for visiting the town is because they went to the market. So you can see how there's a wider economic sort of ripple effect. And so this is what, here we're trying to calculate this kind of ripple effect of the market. We also found that most people that shop in markets travel in sustainable ways. Particularly, they might go on bus, or they walk, or they go on bicycles. And there's less people that go on private means of transport. So most people are using the market, are traveling there in sustainable ways. That's quite different to perhaps out-of-town supermarkets and shopping centers, where we mainly have to go in private cars because it's very difficult to access in public transport. Markets tend to be very central. So again, they can become very sustainable travel destinations. And I also wanted to mention this idea of the circular economy and in community wealth building. And by that, I mean this idea that by shopping in markets, we're able to keep the economy local. So, market users shop at the local traders and they spend other money in the town center. Then the local traders receive this income to spend on local services, taxes and rents, and they also pay to the local authority for the rents and charges. The local authority then receives income from local traders to cover for the operation of markets. And sometimes there's a surplus from this, and the surplus gets reinvested in other local services, which then benefit local customers. And these local customers then sort of spend money in the market and so on and so forth. So this is a kind of way in which we think of a circular and more inclusive economy, and this idea of the community wealth, rather than the model of corporate supermarkets or retail giants like Amazon, which have got not this circular or local community wealth model. So that's what I mean by markets being at the center of an inclusive economy. And I'm almost kind of finishing, because the last two elements that we found is that in order for markets to work in this way, local authorities and operators have to invest in them. And this is obviously not easy because, as you will be aware, local authorities are under increased pressure from austerity, from government cuts. And so often markets are not the kind of place where they're thinking about investing, because they have so many other priorities, social care of an aging population, they have children's services, they have schools, they have waste management. So markets is not often a place where they invest. But if you think of markets as part of this inclusive economy, then you can start to think that they generate further benefits in terms of perhaps mental well-being, health, public health, and as we see, social inclusion. And so we've been trying in my research to kind of bring awareness about these extra benefits the market generate, which hopefully gives local authorities more reasons to invest in them. And we also think that to run a market successfully, you have to do it in collaboration with the community groups and also with traders, obviously. And that's often a little bit, there's often a bit of conflict between traders and market operators around perhaps services or rents and so on. But there has to be an effort to try to run these markets in a community sort of led way. And there's more ideas about how can we set up markets, and that's something we've been doing in our research as well. We've been putting together a best practice for how to set up your own market, sort of community-led markets, also perhaps co-ops or community interest companies. So we're going to be publishing a report on this. Okay, so there are some barriers to adopting this idea of markets as community hubs, and I've mentioned some of these. Markets have been traditionally undervalued and underinvested in. Governance of markets tend to be fragmented, so often there's no collaboration between different aspects of local authority to make this happen. There tends to be little understanding of this holistic role of markets, because the people that manage markets tend to be understandably more worried about the operation and health and safety and these issues. So the wider potential of markets gets lost. And unfortunately, the future of markets often gets cast as a gentrified leisure and foodie destination, which I talked about in the beginning. And I think this is my last slide. So what can we all do in terms of promoting this idea of markets as community hubs for inclusive economics? Well, we can shop in our local market. This sometimes means a little bit more time. Perhaps it's easier to get your shopping delivered at home. But if you think about what the repercussions of this are in terms of sustainability, or who really are we giving our money to? Is it a big corporation like Tesco, or should we be spending our money perhaps in more local sort of economic activities? If you work in a local authority with a market, reach out to make connections, perhaps as Communigrow, as a charity. I don't really know how many connections you got with your local authority or local authorities, but is there a way in which you can connect up? And we have a forthcoming, we have actually already a handbook for operators on best practice for markets as community hubs. So you can find that in our website. If you work in a food organization such as yourselves, find out if there are good links with markets in the area. And if not, try to make them. And I know that Communigrow has been making some of these links. If you have a food initiative with a market, publicize it, get in touch with market industry organizations and disseminate it. And why not perhaps thinking about setting up your own market? It could be very small. It doesn't need to be these kind of big markets I've been talking about. And we are writing now, we're almost finished writing this handbook on how to set up a trader and community-led market. So if you're interested in that, you can, again, this is our website, and this is our Twitter handle, which you can follow us, and my email address if you want to, you get in touch. And that's it. So thanks very much for your interest. And yeah, feel free to get in touch if you want to know more about this research. Thank you.